Welcome back, everybody. My name is David Whitmore. The other voice you will hear is Joseph Whitmore. This is a humorous history podcast about Boudica. And just some disclaimers up front, we're not real historians, which will become evident very quickly. And we're not comedians, but what we hope this is going to be is mostly true and somewhat funny. Um, uh, Another thing, real quick, we for other exclusive content, we have a song, a theme song, and also some of these videos will be available on Patreon. So I'll put the link in the description below. But I think everybody knows what Patreon is. It's a platform that creators can get paid for their content. Our content is going to be free. It's public. But there will be some stuff on there like our new theme song, and we'll start posting videos there as another platform as well. So it's www.patreon backslash or patreon.com/Wita. Okay, so Boudica, she's so awesome. I'm so excited to be talking about this warrior princess because that's what she was. And some cool things about her is that, well, first of all, we don't know exactly when she was born, but she died in 60 or 61 AD, and she was queen of the Iceni. Now, this is the time when the Romans are, pretty much trying to conquer the south of Britain, and they're doing a pretty good job. And the Iceni were a group in the kind of the northeast region. And these guys were great. They're the natives of the British Isles. Kind of like the Native Americans are to the Americans, I guess. But anyway, they were very colorful people. And before the Romans, they held sway in that land. Interestingly enough, after the Romans left, around 500 years later, I think those same people became the Picts, right? But anyway, so Boudica, she was the wife. I think she was the wife. She might have been the daughter of the king. And when, I guess it was it her father that in his will he gave half to Rome and half to his family, and then that the Romans didn't you know live up to their side of the deal. Was that her husband or her father?
That was her husband, yeah.
So she was
Prasudicus, I believe his name is, yeah.
Prasudicus.
So yeah, he was trying to find the famous middle way of getting along with the Romans and
Right.
sort of compromising Romans and still keeping his round huts and his lifestyle. And so he said, so when he was dying, he said, let's sort of split the difference. We're going to pay off the Romans. We're going to pay you off, give you some money, and we're going to let my daughters, take over where I had left off. And I guess the daughter is with the wife, who is Boudica, which seemed like a good compromise to me, right? And I think what he didn't understand was that in the Celtic tribes were that women could inherit. Women could become witch doctors, and women could become druids. Women could run a household. Women could become the leaders, right? It was unheard of in Rome. Roman women stayed home, right? So when the Roman says, "Well, you can't give your inheritance to a non-male," that means it's everything's up for grabs, and that's what they literally they grabbed Boudica and whipped her and gang raped her daughters in front of her. I mean, and that would pretty much piss anybody off, much less Boudica, who you don't want to fucking piss off. There's one person in the whole British Isles you don't want to piss off. It's Boudica.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about her specifically. Um, there's too much distance to do a psychological profile on her. Um,
Yeah,
but
but do you
clear,
really need to? If
right, it
strangers
doesn't.
rape your daughter in front of your eyes while they're whipping you,
Right. So
you
that's what I
don't
was
need
gonna
any
say.
friggin' psychology. You want revenge, right?
Right. Exactly. So what? That's what I was gonna say is that that core fundamental value of being a mom was able to take root, and when they went to war, it was a family affair. So the surprising thing I found, here's another shout out or a thanks to great courses, because it seems like we always go there to start with, for the facts. But the, they were saying that the amount of troops that she was able to garner were pretty incredible, because just the number that she lost, the numbers are like 80,000 at that last battle. So for her to come up with an army that size, even if it was wrong by a factor of two or three, I mean, still thousands of people that she um, got together and retaliated against the Romans, because obviously, of course, there was the whole mother thing with her daughters and all that. Um, but in addition to that, I think where was I going with that train of thought? It was kind of like a last stand to see if they could go up against the Romans in a way.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think there is for Cassius Dio, who's the other. There's two historians. There's Tacitus, I guess, and Cassius Dio, and I actually read those a long time ago in college when I was studying this type of stuff more. And Cassius says there was 120,000 Britons,
That's a
right,
lot.
under Boudica, and everybody today goes, "Well, that's got to be wrong," but I don't know. I mean, why is it wrong? I mean, there was at least 120,000 Celts in Britain, and I'm pretty sure the Britons, the Romans, pissed off every single one of them, right?
That
I
would
mean,
have been.
I don't think Boudica's daughters were the only ones that were raped by a bunch of rowdy Roman centurions, right?
That's
I
right.
mean, if someone raped my daughter, I mean, and here I'm supposed to be civilized, and we have rules of law. I mean, I wouldn't care about any fucking rules of law. I would want to kill somebody.
Right. So.
And I wouldn't even care what happened to me after that, right?
Right, and we can talk about how useful that is or not in battle, right? Because the thing is, you can win battles just on raw emotion. That there's going back centuries, or even the Vikings later, where they would yell and become hysterical. So you can definitely win battles with raw emotion, but you win the war with maturity. And she
Yeah,
didn't.
I think that's the point. Yeah, you can be crazy is very effective in the short term, right? If you come off as someone who's just totally unhinged, people are going to bend over backwards to try to get along with you or try to avoid you.
Well, let's
But
talk. Let's talk.
you've also cut off all means of support, right? I mean, no one.
Well, let's
Eventually
talk.
you're going to lose.
Right. Well, let's talk
You gotta
about
have some
when.
type of order.
Let's talk about when she was winning. Okay, so she gets this army together, and that's what it was a freaking army. And with that amount of people, you know that she had some help. But the thing is that Boudica was lost to history, and Queen Victoria of England was a big fan, and she brought her back, and she was kind of lost again, and then there was a poet that brought her back, and then she was lost again. So we keep losing her to history. But here's where history, the rubber meets the road. Okay, so she's got her army together, and if you look at a map of Britannica or whatever it was called back then, there's a bunch of Roman fortresses or cities, or cities built around forts, these kind of things, and
Trade spinners, yeah.
trade centers. And the dude that was um, in charge of all of, you know, uh, Rome's Britain was all the way to the west. So Boudica had some time. And she started off with the nearest city. And this is the one I'm not.
Colchester.
Colchester, right. So Colchester, and she just whips them like uh, a cousin that owes you money or something. I don't know, but she was just as ruthless and brutal as the Romans ever were. And then she moved on. This is the great one after um, Colchester is, of course, London at that time was called Londinium. I love that.
Yeah, and
Um,
it was only like 30 years old at the time.
right.
It's like
So
not like the London we know about.
you could say that Boudica was the only person to really annihilate London. I mean, the Germans didn't do it in World War II with their bombing, and no one ever come close since
Yeah.
Boudica did. Boudica laid waste to Londinium, and then she moved on to the other big place
Hey,
was.
St. Alba, they call it now. I forgot
Well,
what it
the
was
thing
called
is,
back then.
I know it's because I lived there. I lived there for a
Oh,
year. Yeah, it's called St. Albans,
oh, St. Albans. Yeah, you lived there. That's right. You lived in England for a while
and
when you were back in the
but it was
Silicon Valley.
called Verilium back in those days, and they did the same thing there. When I was there, I knew it had some ancient past. There was a huge, um, uh, Roman stuff there, the cathedral and whatnot. But anyway, I didn't know about Boudica then, as I didn't know about Boudica last week. See, that's the thing. Why does she keep slipping into history? Nobody knows. Um,
Yeah, I have a theory, right? I think to me, Boudica is England's answer to Joan of Arc, right? So because they're sort of the same, right? They're both warrior. Not well, Joan of Arc wasn't a princess, but she was a warrior saint, and they both ended up losing, right? But in losing, they actually win in a certain extent, right? But Joan of Arc, so France has Joan of Arc, and they're very proud of their warrior saint, and like England goes, well, we don't have a Joan of Arc. We actually killed Joan of Arc, so we have to have our own version. And they go, well, hey, look at this Boudica lady in the past. We can sort of use her as our answer to Joan of Arc, who, the French were fighting the English, but now the English were fighting the Romans, so it all sort of makes sense.
yeah, and
And
she clearly did leave a mark because um, she killed a boatload, loads of
boatload,
Romans. But the thing is, what
boatload of Romans, yeah.
right? But the thing
Probably
is,
more. She probably killed more Romans than Joan of Arc killed Englishmen, don't you think?
it's hard to say, but it's quite possible, I would imagine. But here's the thing: the dude. The other thing. Well, I was going to talk about how it ends when the and the Roman, the guy that's in charge gets back home and takes care of business. But you know what I was also going to say is like all those tribes and Rome occupying them because they were in a smaller area. They were able to unite. You know, the Native Americans could have done the same thing, except they were spread out over I don't know how many
Yeah.
thousands and
Also,
thousands of
also,
miles.
also, the American Indians got decimated by
Disease,
European diseases, where
right?
the Celts never had that problem, right? They had the same microbiomes in their guts as the Romans, right? So the Romans couldn't come and kill them, and they were more concentrated, and they were basically the relatives to the Gauls. The Gauls are Celts too, right? So the
Exactly.
Romans had already you know, I think the Caesar type generals are long gone, right? They're like at the bottom of the barrel by the time they get up to England. This General Suetonius I guess, was pretty good, but he wasn't there. He was like in some other part of England when Boudica was laying waste to the landscape.
So he gets back,
Yeah,
and
and then he just abandons London.
That's right. So he knows.
There, and he goes, "Forget this shit." Well, I mean, he was a very good general for doing that, right?
Yeah.
He traded. They call it trade space for time, right? He realizes that he's not going to take on Boudica in an open plain, right? She has 120 to his 10. She could just surround him and wipe him out without, no matter how much discipline they have, right?
Right, so he
So
finds the perfect location, and and they still don't know exactly where it is, but clearly it's in the south of England, and I love the way they set this up. The Romans set it up knowing that they can't retreat because their backs are to this really thick wooded area, so they know there's no retreat, and they're outnumbered, but they're confident because they're very well organized and they're not scared.
discipline.
They're disciplined, and they're not scared of the yelling and the war paint and all that. See, that's why I love these guys because they do remind me of Native Americans with the war paint. So, anyway, so Boudica's people also create a situation where they cannot retreat, but they didn't do it intentionally because the way.
Yeah, they were so convinced they were going to win, right? They brought their kids.
That's right. So like I said, it was a
They
family.
brought daycare.
It was a family affair, and they brought everybody. They brought the kids so the kids could watch them, massacre Romans, because that's always good for your kids to see. But in this situation, 2,000 years of war, that what do you call it? That institutional knowledge in big organizations. The Romans had that. They had that institutional knowledge that went back,
Yeah,
hundreds of years, and
yeah,
and they were fighting against people that didn't. So
yeah. So I mean, the Romans were in the Iron Age. Maybe the Celts were in the Bronze Age. I mean, it was like, well, the American Indians were in this friggin' Stone Age, right? At least the North Americans. So it was, there was a quantum shift in civilization. It was a clash of civilizations, and as civilizations advanced, I think you're right. The Romans had iron and discipline and institutional knowledge, and they already had beat up their ancestors in France, right? So it's not like this is their first time to the dance. Uh,
yeah, it's kind of sad.
it's sad, but the thing is, she could have won, right? She could have won. She almost did win. I think she would have won if she hadn't attacked at that point. There was no reason for her attack at that point. The reason that he had to bring it to battle because he was out of resources, right? He's not like Boudica who can live off the land, right? They know how to live off the land, and that's what one of her speeches, and I think Cassius Dio says. He goes, "Look, we can go eat friggin' leaves, right? We can sleep in streams. We can make a house out of a tree. These Romans, man, they need a bed, right?
Yeah.
They need canned beans, right? Canned beans, but they need their little things. They can't exist like we can. We can stay here forever, and they're trapped in this valley. All she had to do was wait him out, and they would have starved to death and surrendered, right? There was no reason for her to go straight at him, except for the fact, like you said, she was pissed off and she wasn't willing to wait him out. She wanted blood, and she wanted her two daughters, who were standing next to her at this battle,
Yeah.
right? To say, "This, we're getting these people who violated you, and you're going to watch us. You're going to watch me kill these people. You can wash your hands in their blood." So I think that's where the passion led her. That's why she lost. I don't think it's like you said. It's a difference between passion and system. Once the Romans got in that position, their military history and discipline, and with a good leader like Suetonius, not like the original generals, they were going to be impossible to beat.
Yeah. Yeah, they would have lost anyway because Rome won and they stayed in control for almost 500 years there. Okay, so it was going to, but she represents in my mind, you know, fighting back from injustice. That's it.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
represents
that,
that,
yeah, yeah.
if nothing else. Even though the numbers at that last battle are ridiculous, they said that she lost 80,000 and the Romans lost 400. Even if that's exaggerated both ways, it was a sad day for the British, for the
For
Celtic.
the Celts, yeah. For the
So I
Iceni,
just,
Iceni and her allies, right?
what I love
And
about
yeah,
her though,
and she disappeared after that. Everybody says she killed herself and her kids, but who knows?
who knows? In
Who
that
really
kind of
knows?
a massacre, she could have got killed in the battle, and they would have never found her body. But one of the things that is was this great visual, and I'll try to find the right thumbnail of her. So we all know what a chariot is, and we've all know about like how technology, um, you know, got better and better over the ages, but it didn't get that much better. You know what I mean? So like, what? Really, the chariot that she had, it's like, come on, can't you just ride the freaking horse? It's ridiculous. It's like it's a wicker chariot or something. I think I would just shoot a flaming arrow to that thing and watch it just fucking go up in flames. And
Yeah,
why didn't
maybe.
they? You know what? This whole, in my mind, I guess it's easy to look 1,000 years in the future and go, you know what? They had bow and arrows. They should have just focused on that technology and screw everything else. It should have just been, because the Romans had armor and they didn't. But you know what? The only thing that the longbow technology did is just a longer bow. They couldn't figure that out. Let's make a bow that's longer. It took them 500 years to figure out the
Yeah,
bigger the bow. Come on, guys.
that wasn't until like the Hundred Years' War with
Yeah,
Agincourt, right? That was like 1,000 years later before they came up with that. Yeah.
that's ridiculous. Come on, these
but
guys.
but for themselves, what did they have need until the Romans showed up? Right? They were hunter gatherers. You don't need a lot. That's like these hunters who take all these sophisticated weapons out to go hunting. Right? It's like you don't need an M16 or something to go shoot
Well,
deer.
they weren't
And,
exactly
and so,
they weren't exactly hunter and gatherers. They were the best of both worlds. And I want to talk about one of these days. Talk about how many generations and stuff, because it was 81 generations since.
you sound like a Bible verse or
I know,
something.
but it's been 80 generations since Boudica. And then probably a couple hundred more generations since we started moving big rocks around. But we were hunter and gatherers for thousands of generations, and our teeth were better, we were bigger, and they finding out we'd live just as long. So it wasn't like maybe we thought like they were just like at the edge of survival all the time. And plus, with Boudica's people, they could hunt and gather. Plus, they had cattle, and they probably farmed. They
Yeah,
had it
oh, that was
all.
one of the
Plus, they
things.
had the makeup.
During their last battle, they also had brought their cattle for some reason, right? So I guess
That's right.
I
Their
guess,
ox. Well, they had to have their oxen to carry the
I guess
wagons.
there was no one at home to take care of their cattle, so they, like you bring your dog and your cattle's with you because they didn't have any dog, they didn't have any cattle sitters, and that was part of the problem when their army, when their warrior army people, when their soldiers started retreating, they ran not only into their kids and their wives and
Yeah.
they also ran straight into their cattle, and the cattle was not going anywhere. The cattle didn't know, so the cattle ended up
Yeah.
getting
They
killed,
they
and
trapped.
it was a big mess. So
They
probably a large percentage of that demise of the Celts was caused by themselves
right.
running into their cattle.
Yeah, that was a huge mistake. They trapped themselves, and it's, you know what, we could classify Boudica as one of the badass women of history because we've done a lot now. We've done Joan of Arc, we've done Cleopatra, we've done Eleanor of Aquitaine, or you could classify this as one of these like charge of the light brigade because holy shit, this battle was dumb. It should
It was,
never have been that lopsided.
it was dumb. It was up there with the charge of the light brigade.
It was
But
dumb.
but yeah, but the charge of the light brigade was by these English. Well, I guess these English people
It
like
was.
1,000 years, well, 1,500 years in the future,
They're
right?
still
I
making
mean,
really bad mistakes.
yeah. Uh,
All right.
it's
Well,
yeah, it's sort of like the Battle of Thermopylae, but they didn't. There was no way to get around the Romans. I still think if I was there with her, I go, I know you're pissed off. I'd be pissed off too, for sure. But you got these people in a friggin' hole, right? They have absolutely nowhere to go,
oh, they
and
should have
you've got to
sieged him. Sieged him and starved him out.
Just that's what I'm saying. They didn't have. I mean, Suetonius needed this battle, right? He was at the end of his rope. He couldn't run anymore. He was out of time and land. He had to fight, and which was that was his speech. He says, we're not going home unless you go through these people. There's nowhere to retreat, and they do not take prisoners. They do not take slaves. They don't want slaves.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. The Romans could never understand that. They're like, why would you?
It's like,
Why don't you want slaves?
yeah, I'd be a great slave. You don't kill me.
I'd be a perfect slave. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. So that was there. That was his little speech. He goes, you got to beat these people. And so, yeah, they had the technology on their side. She just should have sat them out, and then once they got weak from hunger, go in there and wipe them out.
Oh, ma'am, the electricity just went off.
That type of long-term planning wasn't what they wanted. They wanted to fight. They wanted to kill these people. And I can understand it, but sometimes you gotta back it up a little bit.
All right, we gotta sum this up. My electricity just went off over here. But tune in next time for our surprise person in history.
About Boudica, though,
Sure, sure, sure.
she captured, just say how pissed off people were, right? And she has become sort of a heroic figure. Even in London, there's a statue of her defending London, which is so ironic, right? She's right, but now there's a statue of her. But when she conquered these cities, she captured their women, and she cut off their breasts or her army, and she made these women eat their own breasts. So it wasn't just a matter of killing people. They were into torturing their captives, which is another reason why the Romans really didn't want to get captured.
Wow. That's right. But you
So
got to also remember that everything that was written about her, this is just like our Native Americans, everything that was written about them was written by the people who conquered them. So they didn't have a
yeah, which
written
is
language.
funny. Why how like it's right. It was, but even Tacitus and I think Cassius Dio admired the shit out of her. I mean, and she became a hero of England, just like the Joan of Arc of England. So even though her history was written by the victors, she's one of those few people, defeated people, who actually ends up becoming heroic. And the more dubious side of her conquest, no one talks about how she tortured people. All they remember is her last noble last stand, her charge of the Light Brigade.
Your charge of the Light Brigade was awful.
It was
Well,
awful.
I think I'm going to sum this up by saying what I said in kind of the beginning by it's, well, obviously, she represents fighting for injustice, but also that you can win battles with raw emotion, but the war is won by maturity. But she is so cool, but Rome wins. And was there
Yeah, and England became a nice little Roman colony for the next 300 years. And nobody looked back. It was like they actually enjoyed being Romans eventually. Just like the Gauls. The Gauls by that time were having tea and cake and going to Starbucks, right? Well, the Roman equivalent of Starbucks. So, I mean, once you're defeated, you sort of go, wow, Roman life isn't so bad. They got roads,
I know, it's so crazy.
They got roads.
They got rose, and they liked wearing the togas and then all that, and
They have
then
these they have little coliseums and mock battles. This is so much more fun than being a Gaul. So yeah, people forgot very quickly until like the Victorian era when they dug up Boudica to be their version of Joan of Arc.
you know what? That was so weird too because it was spearheaded by Queen Victoria, who the Victorian age is named after, and that means that women, in the Victorian age, women knew supposed to be where the place was in the home and all that.
Yeah, I know.
So
It's so ironic,
it's
right?
completely ironic because Boudica,
It's also ironic because British was a friggin' empire at that time, right?
yeah,
Britain was like friggin' taking over like the whole world, right? Where the sun never sets on the Britannica, the British Empire, and Boudica is like the
yeah, that's so
epitome
weird.
of anti-imperialists.
That's so weird,
And
but
she
it worked
certainly
out.
wasn't guarding London.
Right?
She was friggin' burning London. You
She
guys got it
literally
all wrong.
she literally burned down London. That's so
But if
true.
you go to London now, she's one of the statues, one of the main statues of the London heroes. So there you go. It's one of those twists of history that we don't quite understand. I think it's amazing how, I guess it's the British, they can turn history to turn their enemy into their hero. You know,
Right. That's right. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah, and then civilization marches on. Yeah,
Civilization, like
let's not get
Boudica's going, no, man, I'm not your friggin' hero. I wanted to kill you guys.
all right. I want to end this now because I'm going to start talking about just a whole range of other things and it will get really off
Okay.
the chart. But tune in next week and we're going to do a surprise person. I don't know who it is yet, but we'll find out. And thanks again to Great Courses and Patreon, www.patreon.com/WITTA, WHITTA, for exclusive content and music. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.